I just thank you so much because this is a perfect topic for a change leader in a class about
And
changing.
then I became the accreditation liaison officer. At the same time, I was the associate dean of
Okay.
planning. So, and then went into the dean position and now as an executive dean position. So I just received this position in this early spring. It's the
Okay.
executive dean of institutional effectiveness and strategic initiative. And within that scope of work, I handle everything dealing with accreditation, grants, initiatives, categorical funding, all of those pieces. I deal with everything related to planning. And it's not that I own them, but I facilitate the process to ensure that we can create a planning structure that has resource allocation tied to it. I'm also responsible for obviously everything equity. Institutional research is within my purview, so I oversee that entire department. And then I also do oversee program review and assessments. And so I handle those 5 or 6 areas.
That's a lot of different hats. As you were progressing in acquiring new skills, you were also developing leadership skills. Were you planning on moving up to dean?
It was absolutely something that intrigued me, especially after my early experiences with management and leadership at MSJC, because it was very different at that point in time.
My experiences with many of the female leaders at the time taught me of what I didn't want to be. When I got in that role, I was not going to be that type of leader because I did not feel supported moving up by females. My glass ceiling has never been men in an organization. It has always been the women. Just beyond intelligent women, and that I admired about them. But very much of, and I'm going to say the old guard where, sweetheart, you got to just work a little bit longer. You need to pay your dues, in their minds and hearts, trying to help and build character and do all of that. But that's not how I received it. And so I knew at that point in time that the way that I would want to manage and lead would be entirely different.
What is your leadership theory or your leadership approach?
I don't have that background in what you might have learned, where you can put a term around me and say, okay, your leadership theory is this, or your leadership style is this.
But you know what you like. Do you know what I mean? And what's important and what you value. And then you can tell me that, and then I can figure out what leadership theory it's into.
Perfect. Okay, so I value in leadership, communication and transparency are everything, because I need folks to be able to trust me and know that I have integrity in my decision making, that I have discernment as I'm trying to make decisions and recommendations moving forward, that I can facilitate those conversations and come to some consensus where the group can move forward. We have brilliant minds sitting around the table, and we just need to be able to bestow that trust in each other enough that we can move forward. And I think it has as much to do with me as it does with everyone around the table, giving us the benefit of the doubt to move forward and say, okay, I've seen her work and I understand where she's going, and she hasn't led us astray before. I do not have a personal agenda. My agenda is the students, and to ensure that folks feel supported and have the resources they need to be as successful as possible. And I'm not in competition with the other deans, because I know that I bring a skill set that's very unique to all of them, and they bring something that I cannot contribute either.
One thing that kind of popped in my mind was path goal. What is your goal, and what kind of path do we need to forge to get you there? And it kind of sounds like you did that with the grant writing as well. Like, the goal is to get these 100 children. We've got to work together to get that path, right?
Yes, no, absolutely. I want folks to feel value in what they're doing and not feel that they have made a misstep. We're just learning from that and we're just adjusting. I am going to hold this until we're successful, whatever that success might look like.
So how did you come to be tasked with the leadership of the Equity Pledge?
We all valued equity so much, our leadership, executive cabinet and all of that, that knowing that I don't let things fail, that they wanted a different perspective in that team to be able to move forward. Conversations were starting to happen. It became really apparent that folks wanted to have some type of tangible document that was a tangible commitment from our organization on what we stood for relative to equity.
What folks wanted that?
And I say our faculty, our staff, those that were our equity champions, that, were super passionate about this effort and didn't feel that administration was necessarily as passionate because we weren't as visible, or we didn't articulate that in our actions or how we were moving forward with decision. And so in hearing that information multiple times in multiple areas, it really became apparent that we needed to create some type of document that was a symbolic representation of our equity commitment at the institution. Nobody forced us to. And, it wasn't something that was required from the chancellor's office, which I think is why it's so much more powerful and impactful as a document, is because nobody told us we had to. And so because I do most of the planning and I help facilitate, I think that's how I was placed in that role, in that leadership capacity, to shepherd the project, not own the project, because it is not mine, but it is our collective institution's document. Knowing that we wanted to do a strategic equity plan, it became apparent that before we even got there, we needed to create a document that defined for us what equity meant. I think the first thing was a commitment from our leadership that said we needed to have a strategic equity plan. Outside of the equity plan, we submitted to the chancellor's office. So that was step one of this entire journey. And then what we did was we created a task force specific to the equity pledge that included a diverse group of folks that represented faculty and administration and different elements of the organization. And then we worked collaboratively on the outline to the historically discriminating practices and policies would look like, what equity timeline looked at like at MSJC. We just drafted those collectively until we came with a document that I could then share with executive leadership to make sure this is the direction we wanted to go before I started vetting that with the C committee, with the equity implementation team, because I recognize as a leader, I need to make sure that we're moving in the direction of the leadership wants to move in, because I don't want folks to be disappointed that they're so excited about this product. And then if it gets to exec and they're like, whoa, this is not what we had agreed to. So all along the way, I make sure that I maintain communication with EC on this effort. And I think that's what really changed the game in all of this, was that there was a direct tie between the work that was being done and with executive leadership, so that communication could go both ways. Because I think the conversations had happened so many times before that we were just packaging that collective information together.
So maybe one of the things that went well was that it was well timed.
Oh, absolutely. The timing right now is that we were all together. We were all having the same conversations. We were sharing that information. We were sharing about past hurts, what went wrong, and how we can make solutions. And so that was part of this process also, was a healing from all of the mess that had happened in the past. If we weren't being committed to equity, and if in 5 years that data didn't change, shame on us. We were able to really identify what we thought the issue was, and that it wasn't the students, it wasn't their fault. Data has a way of just, it can tell a story, but it can say nothing at all. And we could humanize it almost. This story was entirely different because we were also faced with these programs with Amen and Emoja and these students that are phenomenal, and that we've been beginning to know even more and better, and create a relationship with them. And so to be able to humanize that experience and understand that we are responsible, our policies, our practices, and also our mindsets, we are doing things to our students that is not okay. And so I think as soon as it hit that level of realization and ownership, we said, not on our watch. No, how dare we continue with what we were doing, and that we couldn't support our faculty to learn about practices in the classroom, or our staff on dealing with LGBTQ students, and how our vernacular changed as well, and how our understanding of that adjusted, and the microaggressions, and just the information that we are now more aware of and in tune with changed it entirely.